What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mets Central podcast. This is episode 65, as we are going to be recapping the series that the Mets just had versus the Washington Nationals, where they get back-to-back sweeps, taking care of business against teams that we said they should. And now they're on pace. They're on a pretty good track to go 7-2 during this run, because before the Rockies and the National Series, I wanted 7-2. And right now, looking good. A lot of good to take away. There are obviously still a few concerns. And then, one big concern that happened during the game earlier today or yesterday, depending on whenever you consume this episode. But we got a lot to get into in this one. So before we do, leave a like on your way into the show, or if you're watching on replay, subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. Especially if you're Met fans, and turn on your post notifications so you know when we upload or go live. Sorry that we're doing this late at night. We are kind of obligated to doing this late at night because tomorrow we got a show to do for our Rangers channel. So it just chaotic. And then earlier today, watching the Stanley Cup Finals, what a game that was. But we're here to talk baseball. We'll talk about it. If you guys are in the chat, we will get to your comments, questions, concerns, all that stuff throughout the episode. We're not ignoring you. We're going to star your comments and get to them as we go on. But just really nice to see the Mets take care of business, even though it was not easy in two of these games. But it's nice to at least see them get the wins and create more separation for the lead in the division.
Yeah, there's definitely some mixed emotions because look, like getting back-to-back sweeps against teams that the Mets should be beating. We asked for 2 out of 3 against the Nationals. We got one. We got one even better because they beat Mackenzie Gore and they were able to take care of the other 2 games as well. And look, like I said, these were 2 series that the Mets had to take advantage of, and that's what they did. They won a combined 6-0, but there definitely was a sour taste left in our mouths after this game, and particularly one of the reasons was because of how the last game ended. Particularly because it didn't need to be that type. It didn't need to be that close of a game, but it's just how it worked out. Thankfully, the Mets were able to pull it out, and then of course the big piece is new. The big piece of news that we received today, and we saw it live because we were in attendance, was unfortunately Kodai Senga is down with an injury because he sprained his hamstring, which is unfortunate because we'll get into it, but Senga's been the best pitcher so far this year for the Mets in terms of starter wise. So, and it sucks to lose a guy like that. But look, it is what it is. Injuries happen, and it's a next man up mentality. The Mets. We know that the Mets have very good pitching depth within the organization. Yes, it's a little bit stretched out right now because of Minaya and Montas. That the fact that they're still not back yet from the IL. They're currently doing the rehabbing starts, wherever in the system they're doing that right now. But yeah, I mean, look, currently, like, you really can't complain about too much, right? Because they've got the best record in baseball, which is something as Met fans, we haven't been able to say that like for a lot of the times that we've supported the Mets. So that's something nice to see. And the fact that this team keeps cooking at home. I mean, they have a 27-7 record at home. They've played 11 series and they've won 10 out of those 11 series. Obviously, the only one that they lost was the Diamondbacks one, where they lost 2 out of 3. But other than that, I mean, this team is playing very good baseball right now, and it's especially very nice to see when the top of the lineup is starting to severely cook, including Juan Soto, and then 2. I mean, Brandon Nimmo also has really turned the corner lately, and then 3, an unexpected player has really turned the corner, Jeff McNeil. And which we're pretty surprised about because obviously, we were really down on McNeil and out on McNeil coming to this season. But listen, credit to him. He's obviously changed a couple things in his swing and his approach. And right now it's currently working for him. And, hopefully he can keep on, doing whatever he's doing right now.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the biggest takeaway, is that you're at least starting to see the top guys put it together consistently. I think this team finally figured out at least some form of how they construct the top 5 of the lineup, even though I don't agree with the Marte thing at all hitting second. I still think that it shouldn't matter if a guy throws with his left hand or his right hand. Brandon Nimmo needs to be hitting second. The way that he has been hitting in the 2-hole, every single time he's in the 2-hole, he is producing. Both times he was in the 2-hole this series, multi-hit games, and then when he wasn't, not a multi-hit game. So please just keep him there. And then honestly, right now, Jeff McNeil, I think, has cemented himself into that 5 spot fairly well. to where at least we're starting to see some sort of consistency with the lineup, because that's something that I know you've been annoyed about. Everyone that we know that does Met shows has been annoyed about. We've all been annoyed about that. So it would be nice if, that started to become something that is consistent, and it looks like it's starting to formulate into that. But yeah, Juan Soto just continuing his good stretch, positive sign there. Uh, really, honestly, the concerns that I have after this series, I mean, the bottom of the order obviously is what it is. The runners at scoring position thing is what it is. The bullpen, though, this series definitely started to show some cracks that I am a little bit worried about when they were relied upon. And thank goodness David Peterson gave that complete game in game number 2 of the series, because if the bullpen was taxed going into this game, they blow this game. They blow the third game easily because if they had to use Diaz back-to-back days and then, he's unavailable today, you're scrambling here. So it was a good thing that Peterson gave the outing he did. But right now, and we talked about it as we were leaving the game today, this team needs to find maybe 2 high leverage arms, at least 1 high leverage arm, and another guy that at least you can convert to be reliable, because Ryan Stanek, which we'll get into it, just looks awful. Jose Castillo is okay, but he's very replaceable, and he's showed a lot of cracks lately because he's been walking guys. He's been allowing a good amount of hits. He works out of his jams, which is great, but too much working in the jams and putting guys on base. And then on top of that, I mean, Garza, it was good what he did in his appearance, but is it sustainable? Budo, I guess, is a positive takeaway that you could have here. He's looked a lot better as of lately. But this team needs to get some high leverage arms, because it cannot be where you are up 4-0 in the game and you have to go to your closer because one of your relievers that was supposed to be trusted cannot even record a single out. And forget about that, because you had to rely on Diaz and because there's no other options, you had to get Reed Garrett up because Diaz struggled at one point throughout this outing as well. It's unacceptable. So these are things where, again, the bullpen wasn't going to be perfect all year. Stearns said it last year, which we keep referring to that quote, that bullpens are volatile. You're not going to have the same bullpen from opening day that you have at the end of the season. But I need to see some signs, especially from a guy like Stanek, who is supposed to be a trusted arm, because he has not been in the circle of trust for a very long time this season. I could maybe think of like 1 week where it was like, all right, you could rely on Ryan Stanek, and that was early in the season in April. Ever since then, I mean, it's been hard to trust him.
No, he hasn't been good. I mean, he barely. I mean, if it wasn't for just the defensive luck and the overall, I mean, just overall luck of that Brett Beatty was, right in place at the right time, the Mets probably end up losing that first game of the Rockies series, which Stanek was in, and almost freaking he threw away that game. And then, I mean, today, listen, I get you're facing the top of the Nationals lineup, and C.J. Abrams is a good hitter, and James Wood is a very good hitter. He's probably going to make the All-Star game this year. But the fact of the matter is you're up 4 runs. It's a low leverage situation, and you can't even record an out. I mean, that's even the worst thing. It's not even that he put runners on, because fine, that happens once in a while. We've seen Diaz time to time. Like, he'll have his
Even
not
today.
good shaky moments, but he'll still be able to get through it. He'll still be able to get outs. But the fact that Stanek could even record an out, I mean, that's the most concerning thing for me. And there will definitely need to be bullpen additions made to this team, at least for me. And we've talked about this always, and this is just a David Stearns thing. That's at least the one side we don't worry about particularly, because we know that Stearns will uncover these under the radar gems. I mean, look at Justin Garza. I mean, I barely even knew the guy existed before the Mets trade for him. And he comes in and he was able to work out of a jam with 2 strikeouts. So listen, I'm not saying that's going to be sustainable from Justin Garza, but it was good to see that he came up and was able to just get through a jam once in a while. But there will have to be replacements. I mean, you brought it up on the post game that you did 2 nights ago that probably a lefty will be needed, and then after what we saw from Stanek today, our righties will definitely be needed. And look, I know Nunez and Kranick, because Kranick did get called up. He did get called up today, so he'll be with the Mets tomorrow at Citi Field for their series against Tampa. But look, I mean, currently right now with the lefty situation, because listen, I don't mind Jose Castillo, but it's like you said, that's not a guy that you can really rely on and trust on in the long term. I mean, Castillo is basically one of those guys that you could, because like you talked about that, how Stearns mentioned that bullpens are volatile. He's one of those guys, those stopgap lefties that you acquire. They do a job for you, maybe 1 or 2 months of a season, and then you end up letting them go. And then I know they also have Brooks Raley coming back, but the fact that that Brooks Raley is also coming off Tommy John surgery, and he's 36, 37 years old, so you don't know really what you're going to get out of him. So that is a little bit of concern, even though we both love Brooks Raley and we're both big Brooks Raley fans. But that's not a guarantee that he's going to come up here and be the same guy that he was before he got the Tommy John surgery. So definitely a lefty will be needed at the deadline. It still sucks that AJ Minter's out for the rest of the year, and speedy recovery to him as well as Danny Young. But yeah, a lefty will be needed. A righty, like I said, it's definitely going to be needed. But at least, like I said, that's the one thing that we could trust about Stearns is he'll find these cheap under the radar guys that will come up. They'll make a couple of adjustments to either the repertoire or how they how they release a pitch, or they'll make an adjustment to how that person grips the ball per se. And but we'll see. I mean, listen, there's still a month and a half left till the deadline. We could see maybe a move, like a small under the radar move soon, but really like the big type of moves we probably won't see anytime until like the deadline rolls around, which is July 31st.
Yeah, and the biggest concern to me, just to go back to Stanek, because someone replied to one of my tweets about Stanek today and was like, I've never seen a guy throw this hard, but not be able to generate whiffs. And it made me want to do some research in terms of where his whiff rate is at compared to previous seasons. And it is the lowest that it has been, because just looking at it, last year he was at 33.2%. This year he's at 26.5. Huge difference. Huge difference, because for someone that throws the ball as hard as he does, like that person was saying, you should expect him to be able to generate way more whiffs, and especially considering he added a pitch as well. That's the
Yeah.
other thing. He added a pitch to his arsenal, and he's not generating the whiffs the way that he's been. That I don't understand at all what's going on with him there. I really don't. Maybe it's something with overthrowing, similar to what we've seen with Budo, but it's just, again, it's something that is problematic, because you literally cannot rely on the guy. And there's a reason that it's clear Mendoza doesn't trust him, because you rarely see Ryan Stanek in these outings. I mean, you don't even see him come into games where it's like 6-0 or 7-0. You rarely see him pitch at all. And the fact that you rarely see him pitch at all, and every time he goes out there, he looks poor, huge problem. Maybe it's something where he needs to get more in the rhythm, and it's the opposite, where it's kind of like we talk about with Diaz at times, where too much rest is a problem, and you start to throw him out there. Maybe it will correct him and get him going. But for right now, it's hard to argue that you give him that because one, the Mets are constantly in close games to where you can't
Yeah.
risk giving him these type of outings and consistently throwing him out there to get him right. And number two, he's not serving himself any favors to earn that opportunity to go on maybe back-to-back days, or to maybe go out there, every other day at the very least.
Yeah, and listen, that's the thing that you mentioned, where maybe it is a thing where he has to get into a rhythm, like with Edwin Diaz. But as you said, the Mets, they play a lot of close games. Now that's due to the fact it would be nice if they start to hit more with runners in scoring position, and the fact that that they maybe could get bigger leads in those games, so you could throw out those type of guys more often. But look, even today, like I said, you had a 4-run lead, you had a pretty good cushion to work with, and still you couldn't get an out. And then and then back to the lack of whiffs part. I mean, we even saw in the Dodgers series, and I know it didn't come back to bite him in the ass, and Stanek was able to get through that inning, but he got into so many long battles with a couple Dodgers players. And listen, I get that the Dodgers have a very good lineup, and it's it's tough to maneuver around that lineup. But again, like when you have that type of velocity on your fastball, and you can't generate any type of swing and whiff stuff, it's very concerning. And also the fact I don't think he uses enough of his secondary stuff at all. I mean, he has a solid splitter. That's a pitch that that he's gotten plenty of swings and misses off. In previous years, he added the slider to his repertoire. Yeah, I really don't know what it is with Stanek because, like we said, if it is just basically a rhythm thing, then I mean, basically, with the fact that the Mets play so many close games, like you can't risk pitching Stanek in a close game, especially if the type of Stanek we're going to see is the ones that we saw in Colorado, and then the one especially that we saw today. It's just you cannot you can't risk those games, especially with the fact that the Mets are in a close divisional race right now with the Philadelphia Phillies. And listen, every win counts. I get that it's only June 13th currently, but every win counts. We saw how the season ended in 2022. And listen, I'm not saying that the division is going to go down to the wire like it did in 2022. Hopefully not, because that was one of the most stressful times I've ever had watching baseball and this Mets team specifically. But it could happen. The Phillies are a good team. They're not playing well right now, but we've seen good and bad. We've seen good teams go through bad moments. It happens, but I said there's still plenty of baseball left to play, and you can't just throw away these games just because you want to throw a pitcher out there. You have to throw out your guys that you trust the most. And if Stanek is not going to pitch well, then Mendoza is not going to use him. It's simple as that. And we even saw the same thing last year towards the end of the season. Stanek was hardly used at the end of last season, and then it wasn't until the playoffs where he turned the corner and he managed to found some momentum, and he was actually the only reliable piece in that bullpen besides Diaz and half of Reed Garrett. So I don't know what it is with Stanek. I really do not.
Well, I could tell you part of it is definitely just like a change in the arsenal, just because you're talking about that. And by the way, it was the sweeper that he added, and just to put into perspective how much of a difference though, his pitch mix is. He's relying on his four seam fastball. Last year he used it 59%. This year he's up to 62. Last year with the splitter, he was at 21%. This year he's down to 10% with the splitter, which, like you said, is a pitch that made him very successful. The slider, 17%, went up to 23. So maybe it's something as simple as using a splitter more. Maybe it's just that simple of a fix. And I do think there is maybe a little bit of overthrowing, just given the arm angle being a little bit different from his release point. Maybe it's a bit of both things, but I'm willing to correlate it more to the fact that he's just not using a splitter enough, because 10% compared to 21 last year. And I know last year in the regular season he wasn't great, but try to use it. Like that's one of your best pitches. So I don't know. Maybe it's something as simple as that, but we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully he does turn a corner, because I can tell you right now, to me, it goes beyond the concern of the regular season. It's, can you put together the best roster for October? And I know that Stanek is a playoff riser. He has notoriously been that throughout his career, but I'm not seeing anything that's going to, if he's going to be like this down the stretch, this isn't going to be a Ryan Stanek that you could use come October, because the strikeout stuff is down too. I mean, last year he was at a 10.9 Ks per nine. This year he's at 8 Ks per nine. So everything's dropping right now. It's just like he's trying to change the way that he's pitching, and it's just not good enough. It's really not at all. So we'll see if there's improvements and tweaks there. Let's get into the recap though, because we spent a lot of time talking about this. But here we go. Wrong game. Sorry. Game number one, though. Griffin Canning versus Mackenzie Gore in the top of the first inning. CJ Abrams with a double. And then Nathaniel Lowe hits a home run to make it 2-0. And it did not look good early, because in the second inning as well, the top of the second, Call with a single, Tenna with a single, Abrams then with a double to make it 3-0. Soto, though, throws out Tenna, trying to cross the plate there, which would end up resulting in being a big play down the stretch. In the bottom of the second, the Mets would respond as Brandon Nimmo with a single. He steals with 2 outs, and McNeil with a single to make it a 3-1 ball game. The bottom of the third inning, Juan Soto with a solo shot. to make it a 3-2 game. And in the fifth inning, Abrams would respond with a solo shot of his own to make it 4-2. But in the bottom of the eighth, with 2 outs, Marte walks, Soto doubles to make it 4-3. Alonso singles to make it 4-4. He tries to stretch it to a double, but unfortunately gets tagged out over at second base. And McNeil in the bottom of the 10th inning would walk it off with a single as the Mets will win by a final score of 5-4. In game number 2, it was David Peterson versus Jake Irvin. In the bottom of the first inning, Brandon Nimmo walks. Alonso doubles to make it 1-0. In the bottom of the third, Lindor doubles. Soto hits a 2-run home run to make it 3-0. That is a home run on back-to-back days, and that is 4 straight home runs at Citi Field for Juan Soto. Then in the bottom of the fifth, Brandon Nimmo with a home run to make it 4-0. And again, hitting in the 2-hole in the bottom of the seventh makes it 5-0 with a home run. In the eighth inning, the Nationals would show some urgency there and show a little bit of fight. Garcia with a double, Young with a single, but Taylor guns Garcia out at the plate as he tries to score. And David Peterson would throw a complete game, giving the Mets much needed volume, like we mentioned before, to save the bullpen. And really, I mean, he didn't work into too much trouble throughout this entire outing, which was very nice to see. And we'll talk more about that one later. And then in game number 3, it was Kodai Senga versus Mike Soroka. And in the bottom of the first inning, Lindor and Soto walk. Soto steals, passing his season high last year in stolen bases. McNeil with a 3-run shot to make it 3-0 as it just sneaks over the right field fence. In the bottom of the fifth, Brandon Nimmo would make it 4-0 with a solo shot of his own. In the sixth inning, though, Kodai Senga would departure the game with a hamstring injury. He will be going under further testing and will get an MRI tomorrow or today, I guess you could say, whatever. On Friday, he'll be getting an MRI, and we will find out more on that. He has been placed on the IL, unfortunately. Just a freak mistake play there. Pete Alonso not making the best throw there. Kodai Senga leaping to grab it. The thing that is a little concerning is that Senga did mention that he felt a little bit of pain there before that play happened. So I'm a little worried, to be honest with you, but I'm expecting the worst until I hear better. That's just how I am, unfortunately. But he left the game there. Castillo comes in. He allowed a hit, but ended up working through it. In the bottom of the second inning, with 2 outs, Beatty and Taylor single. Alvarez walks. Lindor hits into a force out to end the inning, as that was a theme for the Mets today. They would get guys in scoring position and not come through, which did become worrisome because in the top of the ninth inning, Stanek comes in, allows 3 straight singles to Abrams, Wood, and Garcia. Diaz comes in and walks low. Bell then gets a single to make it 4-2, but Diaz thankfully works out of the jam, giving us a heart attack, but he worked out of it, and the Mets would hold on to win 4-3 and complete the sweep of the series. So obviously a lot to unpack here. Some good, some bad. The bad, obviously, with Senga. We mentioned Stanek already. But the good, at least, is someone like Jeff McNeil, who has now strung together back-to-back good series, which is very encouraging to me.
McNeil he's really turned the corner, and to be honest, I'm very surprised because we've always said and like I mentioned before that we were very down on McNeil going to this season. This was a guy that we wanted to be traded, we wanted to be off the roster, even though that wasn't too realistic just because of his contract and the fact that he's still making $15 million for a guaranteed another 2 years. But look, obviously he started the season on the IL. He with I forgot what his injury was, but he came off the IL and he kind of struggled, throughout the first couple weeks. He was up here after coming off the IL, but yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, the last 2 series specifically, he's really turned the corner. And we've always talked about and heard the news of McNeil, how he's always changing his bat. Obviously, he's using a torpedo bat this year, but he's changing around his approach, his swing, his batting stance. And I know we kind of joke around a little bit and get on McNeil as he always switches around all the the stuff too much. But whatever he's switched it to, it seems to be working now. And I think the biggest thing with McNeil is he's really, just changed overall how he is as a hitter because, obviously, if you recall, back when he got called up in 2018 and when he had that really good season in 2019 and then 2022 when he won the batting title, he was more of a slapstick hitter. And, and especially over the last couple of years, like, obviously in those years it worked for him, but over the last couple of years, he's really gone away from that. And that approach really hasn't worked for him anymore. And it was clear, like we talked about, that there needed to be a change in how, his plate approach and his overall, swing. And listen, while like I said, Jeff McNeil wasn't more of a power hitter, back in those years in 2019 and 2022, he switched it to where, now he started to hit the ball a lot more in the air, and he started to actually put a lot more exit velocity on those batted balls. So now those fly balls are actually traveling and, they're getting over the heads of the outfielders and they're actually being able to clear the wall for home runs. And I really got frustrated with McNeil in that Dodgers series, specifically the last, or yeah, I think it was the last two games, but it was more the last game specifically because he had just a horrible game with runners in score position, and he kept just flying out at the right fielder. I'm like, this is not working for McNeil. Like, why are we still playing him? And then, we get to the Colorado series again, still didn't have a first game, but then it was the second game. And again, I get it is Coors Field then, but still as a baseball player and as a hitter, you have to take advantage of the difference in elevation, the fact that Coors Field is a hitter's friendly park. But he started to hit, like I said, he started to hit the ball a lot more in the air, started, putting a lot more exit velocity on the ball. And, he hit a couple home runs in that series in Colorado. And then he comes into this series, has a big RBI single in the first game. And then today, obviously, with the Mets needing a quick start, he obviously gives you that big 3-run home run in the bottom of the first inning. So listen, like I said, whatever McNeil changed to his whole approach and his swing, it's working. And listen, and he needs to keep on doing what he's doing right now, because as you said, he's cemented a spot right now in the 5-hole for this team.
Yeah, and he's starting the game I trust so much that I'm willing to, sit here and say that this could be a huge, like, if McNeil continues this, that is huge because it saves the Mets from needing to address another position at the deadline. Because to me, going into the deadline, if you asked me 2 weeks ago, I would say they desperately need to fill in at least one of second or third. Ideally, you need to fill in both because you were starting to see Beatty tamper off. Vientos has not hit this entire year. And then Acuna has not hit outside of like 1 week this year. And then Jeff McNeil was struggling the way he was. Now you're starting to see, though, consistency with McNeil. And, we'll see how it translates going forward. But, if he keeps this up, one, he might make a late push for the All-Star game, because if you look at the NL second base class, there's really no one else outside of maybe Brendan Donovan that's giving a run for McNeil's money. And even then, right now, I would say McNeil should be getting more votes than Donovan, considering the production being similar when in less games rather. So that's my argument there. But again, yeah, if this could continue going into July and then come the trade deadline, you're looking at one position that doesn't need to be addressed, which would be huge because you could save some prospects, save some assets there, and address other areas of need. Maybe spend more to get a third baseman, spend more to get a center fielder, or wherever else, because the bottom of the lineup, don't get me wrong, needs depth badly. Because when you look at these games, I mean, outside of McNeil getting 2 hits and then Taylor only had 1 hit there, you just had nothing from the bottom of the order in game 1 at all. And then in game number 2, you had nothing from the bottom 4 of the order. It's just, you're not getting enough from the rest of these guys. It's really just the big 4 guys on their contracts plus Jeff McNeil right now that are giving the production consistently. And, again, if McNeil keeps this up, one less area to address, and the more you could spend to make this lineup deeper, which would be really nice to have come July.
No, that's definitely a big plus of the whole, strategy on how the Mets and David Stearns are going to really approach the deadline. Because again, if that's one less bat now you have to add, maybe now you could throw a little more prospects and add, maybe a better outfielder. Obviously there was the rumors about the Mets potentially going to add, going to talk with the Red Sox about, trading for Jarren Duran. Maybe you could throw more prospects at that trade, to get that trade over the line.
or
Maybe,
even a roster player.
a roster player, or maybe, since, Senga's hurt and we don't know the severity of that yet, maybe, the Mets are going to turn their attention to add maybe a more of a big time starting pitcher. I mean, obviously, there was many rumors about that. We heard Sandy Alcantara, earlier in the season. I know he hasn't had the greatest season so far. He's severely struggled since coming off the IL after getting Tommy John surgery. But we know how the Mets operate internally in terms of the whole pitching lab, and you make a couple adjustments here and there, and maybe the Mets could get back Sandy Alcantara to the form that we saw prior to the injury. But no, like like you said, it's a very it's a positive with that thing. And then I mean, listen, you're going to need more additions to the bottom of the lineup, because obviously with the catcher tandem, like Alvarez really hasn't played well. Again, he didn't have a great series. I mean, congratulations to the fact that him and his partner welcome their daughter. So congratulations to them. Luis Torrens, obviously he's played well this year, but can you rely on Luis Torrens, on in terms of long-term production? We all know that Luis Torrens is a very solid backup catcher, but again, if Torrens is going to be your starting catcher day in, day out, like I said, can you really rely on him for long term? And then again, like, we love Tyrone Taylor. We love watching him hoop in the outfield. He had two very nice defensive plays this series. The fact that he threw out a runner in the second game to preserve the complete game shutout, and then he made a very nice diving play in the finale of this series. But again, we know with Tyrone Taylor, like, there's games where he's going to hit well, and then there's some games where he isn't going to hit well. And at the end of the day, Tyrone Taylor would be, your perfect number 4 backup outfielder. It's just right now, with the fact that Siri's hurt and the fact that, you really don't have anyone other else besides Jeff McNeil who can play center field. So Tyrone Taylor is going to have to get the majority of the playing time there. And I mean, obviously you obviously have the younger kids as well. Acuna really hasn't hit in probably like a month or so right now, and he's probably going to end up going back to AAA when more guys start to get healthy. Obviously, Beatty start to cool off a bit more, and then Mauricio, he's had sparks here and there, but still, and again, like, I'm not making a final judgment on Mauricio. We still need to see more, but at the end of the day, like, he's a young kid. He just came off, an ACL tear. So there is going to be time. He still needs to see a lot more pitches. He still needs more playing time, to get into the groove before, we can ultimately make a decision on Mauricio. And look, at the end of the day, the kid's 23 years old, so he's going to have time, and he needs time to develop as well. But there will be, but like I said, and like you said, there will be, needs to address the bottom of the order come deadline time.
Yeah, I just think that he needs to spend a little bit more time in AAA, and it's unfortunate that he had to get rushed up here because of an injury. And I know that we were begging for him for a bit with the way that he was hitting, but I think he needs that time right now in AAA, which we'll see. I mean, it looks like Vientos is going to come back sooner than we think, so hopefully that's something too where maybe we'll see positive signs from Vientos when he comes back. I'm hoping, but I'm at a point where it's like, how do you waste this opportunity with the top guys performing where they are? And it's like, if there's an opportunity that comes, if Vientos isn't picking it up, I'm sorry, but I'm more than okay with moving him to go get help to win now. I'm more than okay with moving Acuna or any of these younger roster players. I'm okay with moving them to go help you win now if, this is what continues from these guys, unless any of them step up. So, we'll see. In terms of other positives, though, throughout the series, like I said, the big elephant in the room is David Peterson giving the length that he did. It sucks that Senga got hurt because it looked like he was going to maybe give 7 or 8 today. But on the David Peterson front, just a really freaking great outing. The best outing I think that we have seen from David Peterson. I think that's fair to say. Yeah, I mean, I said it in my post-game show. I can't call him results, man. Right now, I'm taking a break from the nickname. The dude's a dog. He is just an absolute dog. He goes out there and despite the analytics, despite the numbers, finds a way to get things done. He had 13 whiffs on 50 swings in that start yesterday. And he was, again, just an absolute dog going out there giving 9 innings.
No, Peterson was clutching that game. He was, and I mean, listen, I get that. You know, you could probably consider this his best game because I mean, at the end of the day, he threw a complete game shutout. I still think that his best game was that home game against the Dodgers, and I think for me the main reason was I think his stuff was just a little bit more sharper in terms of swing and miss stuff, and the fact that was a better lineup that he faced. But I mean, listen, he pitched very well in both games, so I'm not going to take away anything from him. And the one big difference that we saw with Peterson in this game, and because I know like the jokes like you mentioned, we call them results man and all that stuff, and the fact that he relies on his defense. And look, he's still got more ground ball and fly outs than he did strikeouts. But the big difference between that start and some of the starts that we've seen prior, earlier this year, and then a lot of the starts that we saw last year, where like I said, the big difference was in those starts a lot of the ground balls and flyouts, they were just made off hard contact, and the defense actually had to make very good plays. In this game, yes, he was getting a lot of ground balls and flyouts, but a lot of it was weak contact, which the defense didn't have to really do much. It was just a perfect ground ball to them or a perfect flyout, to either the infielder or the outfielder. I mean, I could maybe recall two hard hit balls that Peterson gave up all night. I believe the first one was a line out to Pete in I believe the fifth or fourth inning, and then the last one was the top of the ninth inning where the first out where it was a line out to Brett Beatty. But other than that, he was generating a ton of soft contact throughout the whole game, and he was just really in control. And I mean, you see, and I mean, you saw it. I mean, Mendy even talked about it. In the post game press conference that he did after the game 2 nights ago, and he said because obviously there was the debate of do you let Peterson finish that game because he had a high pitch count going to that ninth inning, and Mendy was a little bit hesitant, but he said, you know what, David, you pitched so well that game, take the ball, finish it. And you could tell like after he got that first out, that at bat that he had against James Wood, where he just dotted him up that whole at bat. I mean, you could tell like the adrenaline was flowing. He was into it, and like I said, he was just fully in control of that game. And yes, he did get some help from Tyrone Taylor in the eighth inning of that game with the fact that he threw out a runner at home plate to preserve the complete game shutout. But look, sometimes you're gonna need help. Sometimes you're gonna need help from your defense. It is what it is. But as I said, I mean, and I love this. I love this overall pitch sequencing. Through the fastball and sinker a lot of times. 30 for the fastball, 29 for the sinker. Threw a slider too. That was a very good pitch that he had. His changeup, he threw his changeup a lot too, 11 times. That was also a pitch that I really liked as well. And you know, and the other thing with Peterson that we really get on him is the fact that sometimes he loses the strike zone and he isn't able to throw strikes. But I mean, in that start, I mean, you take a look at the breakdown, the four seamer 50% in the zone, sinker 72% in the zone. Slider 52% in the zone, changeup 55% in the zone. So while the swings and whiffs weren't necessarily there from Peterson, he was placing the ball perfectly in the strike zone, and he was executing every single pitch to the point, like I said, to where he was giving up those soft contact outs. So, listen, credit to David Peterson. His last couple starts have been really really good, and hopefully this continues because I mean, obviously, like I said, with the fact that that Senga's down and we don't know how long he's going to be out for. We're going to need more pitchers to step up now. And listen, this whole pitching staff from top to bottom has done a very good job. But if David Peterson can now take that next step and be that next pitcher that, we maybe thought he could be when the Mets first drafted him, that would be huge for this team.
Yeah, and the other thing that I brought up on the post game, and I will bring the point up again, is the numbers don't back it up, but it feels like from the eye test, Peterson does a better job facing the order a third time versus previous years because it always felt like he would hit a wall second or third time through the order. Now he's just going through the order pretty well for the most part. So again, the numbers will never support Peterson in terms of like the in-depth analytics and everything. If you look at baseline stuff, obviously that's different, but the analytics, and they even had an interview with him about that, how the in-depth stuff just says like it's not going to be sustainable and this is going to fall off. And then every time it's just like he goes out there and gives a similar outing and it's effective each and every time. So I got to give credit where it's due in that regard. It just shut me up included, because I said during the offseason, maybe in the right deal, you trade him for a better starting pitcher because cash in on what I thought last year was a career year, but it's looking like it's translating into this year. So that's really encouraging. Do you have any other things to add with Peterson before we talk about more positives with the series? But yeah, just great stuff from him.
No, he's been excellent. He's been excellent. I'm thoroughly surprised because I knew that Peterson could maybe be, you know, a nice bottom end rotation guy, like a 5-4 guy. But look, right now he's probably currently performing like a really good 3 or maybe even a solid 2. Listen, I don't think David Pearson will ever become an ace level pitcher. Hopefully I'm wrong, and hopefully he is able to do that. I need to see a lot more before I can come to that conclusion. But look, I mean, again, this is just the pitching lab doing wonders. I mean, I know we get on Jeremy Hefner a lot, for signing autographs, but we can't lie and lie about the fact that he is a very good pitching coach and the fact that he's made a lot of improvements to these guys. I mean, also like we talk about with the pitching lab and also making adjustments on how you throw certain pitches, how you deploy certain pitches. I mean, also the fact that the Mets brought in Desi Druskel from the Yankees. He's also very big on the whole developing pitchers because we've seen over the years how good the Yankees have been at developing pitchers. So and there's also that typical cliche which lefties usually develop later. I mean, we saw it with Jordan Montgomery where it really took him a couple of years before he really became a very good pitcher. I know he's dealing with the injury right now. He had a terrible year last year in Arizona, but listen, hopefully we see similar things with David Peterson, where, like I said, he's able to take that next step and become that very good, reliable pitcher. That guy that could take the ball every 5 days and could just give you length and then solid outings every single time.
Yeah. And with the Hefner thing, great pitching coach. It's literally just the one thing that drives us insane is just how he sometimes takes way too long to go out to the damn mound. If that was not the case, I would love Hefner and would not say a bad thing about him. It's legit just that. But yeah, in terms of other positives, Brazabon looked good today, considering he has had a couple shaky outings. I had a feeling it was something with fatigue, but him getting like 5 days off, I think it was, or maybe even six, definitely benefited him. And he was able to provide some good work today. And then on top of that, Jose Budo looking better as well. So you're starting to see at least some of these things make way and take shape here.
Yeah, Brazabon, like you said, he was a lot better, and it was definitely like I mean we talked about it before. It was definitely a fatigue thing because the stuff was still there from Brazabon. He just looked tired and he looked a bit sluggish out there, and that was just mainly due to the fact that the Mets kept throwing him in these high leverage situations time after time after time again. And listen, I get that Brazabon's a very good pitcher and he's been very good for us this year, but eventually, if you keep running these guys out there constantly, like eventually, there will be a toll in their arm. I mean, we saw it with Reed Garrett last year. We saw even with a small sample size of Reed Garrett this year, where he kind of looked off for like 2 weeks. He was able to get back on track, but still, you noticed that something wasn't right there. I mean, we saw it with Budo last year. We saw it with Nunez last year, where he ended up getting injured because of it. It's just you got to be careful with these guys. And listen, I get that Mendy trusts Brazabon severely. I mean we do because we know that every time he goes out there, he throws strikes, he's effective, and he gets out. But like we said, you can't run these guys into the ground just because you solely trust them. You are gonna have to spread the love out in terms of other guys in your bullpen. And I think it's just listen, it's good he benefited that he got the 5 or 6 days off. I don't want to see it to the point where he's out there every single outing because even we talked about it and we saw during the Dodger series, like in that first game, he throws 30 pitches, and then you throw him out there for the second game to close out the game, and then we saw how that ended with him giving up the tying home run to Max Muncy. So you just got to be careful with these guys because at the end of the day, like we said, we know Brosman has the stuff. You got to be careful.
Yeah, and the other thing we talked about going into the year with Mendoza in general is we want to see improvements in terms of how he manages the bullpen because, you know, I don't like to critique Mendoza and critique the manager, but there are times where I'm just like, I am questioning, how overuse or underuse usage of certain guys in the bullpen. And, I'm not the guy in the dugout and I'm not making the money to be the manager, but, there are times where it just, the example that you brought up where he throws 30 pitches and you throw him in there the next day instead of Budo, who is more rested at that point. It just little things like that where it's like, I'd like to see the improvement there. And Brazaban, especially considering he gives multiple innings, you need to give him a little more rest between these outings. So hopefully that's something that continues. But just to further talk about this series, with the Kodai Senga thing, forgot to bring up that it looks like Max Kranick is going to be the corresponding move. We were talking about that as we left the stadium. Will they go with a guy like Brandon Waddell who could eat some innings? And, I was saying that maybe it's Nunez or Kranick because you don't really need the sixth starter now that Seng is hurt because the whole reason he had it is for him. But I understand what you said because you were saying that Blackburn maybe is going to be shaky and you need a bulk guy. Kranick could at least be that. He could at least give you 2 innings. So good to see him back up as the corresponding move. And it's good to have an extra reliever for the time being. And maybe that will be, a blessing in disguise in a way to have this happen because now you could give guys in the bullpen a little bit more rest every now and then since you have the extra arm back there, if you will. And on top of that, I mean, Senga, you could keep him a little more fresh as we go throughout the season, beyond the fact that you already have him, in a 6-man rotation. Now he's going to be a little bit more fresh as we go forward.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, like we talked about, it sucked at the fact that that he got injured because we were at both games. We were at the game last year where he ended up straining his freaking calf, and then of course we had to be at this game where he strains his hamstring. But it's like I said, and it's like the thing Mendoza said, and obviously it was just a bad throw by Pete. Like, listen, it happens with baseball. Obviously, we know that Pete's not necessarily the greatest with his throws over, specifically, when he's throwing it, to bases or to home plate, because he's had a couple of throws this year where it's costed the Mets runs, and it's even cost them like a game, like it did that series in Washington. But it is what it is. It's a freak thing. It's baseball. Injuries are going to happen, but it's like Mendoza said, like it's a next man thing up. Like I said before, like the Mets have plenty of pitching depth. It's obviously going to be stretched a little bit, but at the end of the day, Minaya, Montas, those guys will come back. We obviously have an expectation of what we're going to get out of Sean Minaya. We don't know what we're going to get. We don't know what we're going to get out of Montas. I mean, he's had a couple of really shaky rehab starts. I'm really not too worried about, just because, and even Meek Phil brought this up on Twitter a couple of days ago, and I totally forgot about it. I mean, Montas didn't even have a spring training because even he got hurt even before the games even started, so he really didn't even pitch it like in a real game at all this year. And the fact those type of hitters, and again, it is AAA, but those guys are a lot more fresh, and they're a lot more up to date, and they're a lot more in a groove than just throwing out a pitcher there. And listen, I get that Montas should be a bit better, but I'm willing to give him a little more leeway and to see, what he does when he first comes up here, because we've seen plenty of pitchers in the past where, they have very poor rehab games, and then they come up to the MLB and, they look like, they never got hurt before. So it is what it is. We'll see. The only thing that sucks, though, and I brought it up in the post game, I was really looking forward to seeing both Senga and Minaya pitching together on like back-to-back days, because that's something that we haven't seen yet. I know Senga pitched in the playoffs last year, but that was still a Senga where his mechanics were off. He
Yeah,
wasn't
it's not the same.
he wasn't even comfortable. So I don't even count that. I don't even count that personally. It's just, it really sucks because, like, we saw last year, and I get that Minaya at the start wasn't the guy that he was at the end of the year, but you basically had Senga out all of last year, and then coming to this year, you expect that both guys are going to be healthy coming into the season, and then it's Minaya this time who has the injury, and then Senga's putting up these really good numbers. And then the also thing that sucks with Senga is this probably will cost him a spot in the All-Star game, which kind of sucks because you would like to see him representing the Mets over there. So. But listen, obviously we're going to get the news tomorrow when he does the MRI. Hopefully it's just, listen, best case scenario, and we were talking about this before when we were leaving Citi Field. Best case scenario, it's a light strain and he misses two starts, maybe 3. That's best case scenario. And the only thing that sucks, though, is I know that the Mets playing the Rays the next series, but when you look at their next 3 series after that, It's a 3-game set in Atlanta, 3-game set in Philly, and then a 4-game set at Citi Field against the Braves. So he's going to at least miss 2-3 starts against those big two division rivals, which that kind of sucks. But listen, the guys in this pitching staff, they're gonna have to step up, like Mendy said. It's a next man up mentality.
Yeah. And the other thing, just to go back to what you were saying with Montas struggling right now, Senga struggled in his last start in AAA last year, and then we saw him come up again, and obviously it ended poorly, but he still had a very good outing overall in those 5 innings that we saw from him last year. So just have to be patient. One of the guys that will have to step up, because that actually does bring me to a topic that I wanted to bring up before we preview the series coming up and then end it. Um, Griffith Canning is one of those guys that needs to step up, because I think it was Anthony Tacoma that tweeted his numbers from his first 8 starts versus most recent 5, I believe it was. Not good. Not as good stuff from Griffith Canning. He did not have a great start at all yet again. Uh, this turn through the rotation, and similar to what we saw when we went to that game against the White Sox as well, because just not good starts from Griffith Canning. He's going to have to step up and start to rebound for sure.
No, he definitely has to be a lot better. The only big difference between that White Sox start and the National start is because if you recall back to that White Sox start, like he was getting hit hard, he couldn't locate the strike zone at all. But like I said, the big difference between those two starts is during the White Sox start, he pretty much he buried them early because he gave up 4 runs in the first 2 innings, and he only gave you 3 innings before Brandon Waddell had to come in and really give a lot of bulk innings. And listen, credit to Brandon Waddell because the fact that he went out there and he 8 innings in that game. But at least Canning in this start, he at least gave you 5 1/3 innings. So he at least gave you some type of length and kept the Mets in the ball game because they did get it back to 3-2 before C.J. Abrams did end up hitting a home run to make it 4-2 in that game. But like you said, we need to see a lot better from Griffin Canning because we know that he has the stuff to be a lot better. And I mean, personally, the thing for me that I didn't like about his start in that first game of the series was I didn't like his pitch sequencing because he went very heavy on the fastball. I mean, he threw it out of his 87 pitches. He threw it 46 times. The slider only 19 times, and then the changeup, which has been one of his best pitches this year, he only threw it 14 times. And you really saw in the game, when he wasn't throwing his changeup, a lot of the pitches that he was that he was throwing to the opposing lineup, like we said, he was there was a lot of hard contact against him. It was a lot of deep fly balls. It was a lot of balls into the gap. But then when he started incorporating the changeup a lot more into his repertoire, not that he was still perfect, but at least he looked a lot better, and he looked a lot more comfortable when he was pitching out there. It's just for me, I think he just has to adjust a little bit of the repertoire because I still think the stuff was there. Like he's still got 12 swings, 3 whiffs on the slider. Like you would like to see a bit more from that, and maybe just cut down a little bit more on the 4-seamer. I know the 4-seamer has been a little bit better this year because and they talked about it on the on SNY during one of the games a couple weeks ago, how he's really, he's changed his grip on his 4-seamer, but we still know that Canning's 4-seamer is still not the most overpowering thing. So I still think Canning can be a reliable pitcher for this pitching staff. He just, like I said, I think for me it's just an adjustment thing on his whole pitching repertoire.
Yeah, 100%. It's something that I expect to be better. Just small adjustments there. But let's preview the series coming up against the Tampa Bay Rays before we end this here. In terms of the pitching matchups here, we got in game number 1, Taj Bradley, who is 4-5 with a 4.58 ERA, a 1.25 WHIP, versus Clay Holmes, who is 7-3 on the year, a 2.95 ERA, and a 1.19 WHIP. Game 2, Drew Rasmussen, who is having a really good year, but 5-4 on the year because the Rays' offense isn't as good. 2.22 ERA and a 0.90 WHIP, which is just disgusting. And then Tyler McGill, which, ignore the typo there, ignore it, who is 5-4 on the year with 3.76 ERA and a 1.30 WHIP. Game 3, Shane Baz, who is 5-3 on the year, with a 4.97 ERA, a 1.34 WHIP, and versus Griffin Canning, who is 6-2 with a 3.22 ERA and a 1.35 WHIP. I want them to take 2 out of 3. I would love for them to get another sweep here, but realistically, I don't know if that's possible. I want them to win games 1 and 3. Ideally, Rasmussen's not easy to go against. Plus, Tyler McGill is a wild card, like we talk about every time we do these previews. You don't know what you're getting. The Rays are playing better baseball lately. Guys like Aranda are playing some good ball right now. Brandon Lau, my guy, of course, balling out there in Tampa Bay. Maybe a future Met. Who knows? Hopefully. I'd love it. But uh yeah, Rays are playing some better baseball, but you still should win 2 out of 3 against this team if you are as good as we think you are. And again, I would like to see them beat up on Taj Bradley and Shane Baz, who are not having great years.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, the Rays have definitely been playing a lot more better baseball than they did at the start of the year. They did get off to kind of a tough start, but I mean, right now they're 36 and 32. They're right now they hold the last wild card spot in the American League. And yeah, I mean, listen, a couple of their guys have started to play better. I mean, Jonathan Aranda, like you said, 878 OPS. He's had a pretty good year. Junior Caminero, he's a pretty good third baseman, 776 OPS. And I mean, I know Brandon Lau and Yandy Diaz haven't exactly had the best of seasons, but I mean, they're still putting up okay numbers. I mean, Brandon Lau, 742 OPS, Yandy Diaz, 732 OPS. I mean, listen, for me, like you said, you at least have to take 2 out of 3 in this series. And I think that they'll win the first game, they'll lose the second game, and they'll win the third game to end that series. Just because, I mean, like you mentioned, Drew Rasmussen has had a very good season. He's he's been a very good pitcher in his time as a major leaguer. Obviously, with McGill, like you said, it's a wild card. You don't know what you're going to get from McGill. You could get a very good Tyler McGill, but then you could get a Tyler McGill who can't find the zone. So it's going to be interesting to see what he has, especially against this lineup. But I mean, yeah, when you have Clay Holmes, who's had a very good season this year against a guy like Taj Bradley, that's a guy that you expect this Mets offense, to go after and score runs. And then, like I said, Shane Baz, 4.97 ERA, not the best years for him. That's a guy again, offense has to get after, put up runs, and then, like you said, I know we just talked about Griffin Canning not being great over these last couple weeks, but this is a chance for him to kind of reset the clock a little bit and kind of get back onto the groove that that we saw from him earlier in the year.
Yeah, so that's where we're gonna wrap things up. So thank you everyone for tuning in and watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live. And we'll see you guys in the next one.